I want your blood. I want your souls. And I want them both right now. I'm Eddie Webb.
And I'm Chris Spivey, y'all.
Today, we're going to talk about Tombstone here on Genreless. Hello and welcome to Genreless, where we continue to talk about Westerns, and we have reached a milestone of a movie I've actually seen before.
Or rather, what you remember seeing, because you claim to have seen Buck and the Preacher, if I remember right. And you had seen Blazing Saddles.
Okay, but this is a movie I have watched multiple times, right? This is Blazing Saddles I've seen a couple times. I think I've seen Buck and the Preacher once. This is a movie that I definitely have recollections of having seen, and I have seen multiple times, to the point where I can quote chunks of this movie from memory. So it's definitely a movie that I am aware of. And on a personal level, this movie, spoilers, I'm not going to be that harsh to this movie. The reason why I love this movie a lot is because this is the movie that got me to realize that Westerns aren't anything I should avoid, right? This got me back into the Western genre after decades of hating the genre. So I have a lot of affection for this movie as a result. Will that affection survive our analysis? We'll see.
I was waiting for your other confession to say that Kurt Russell is in fact your dad, and you never admitted it this whole time.
I mean, there's a fair bit of overlap in how my dad acts and how Wyatt Earp acts, which does not go well for Wyatt Earp in my analysis.
But which version of Wyatt Earp, Eddie? Kurt Russell, Kevin Costner, James Garner?
Well, I mean, I think it's something we should probably get into, although you have more knowledge about this than I do, is that this is in no way, shape, or form historically accurate.
It's a historical homage. That's the best way to put it. There are lots of historical beats that occurred that the movie definitely references in its own way.
Like, my understanding, I didn't actually look this up because I want to have this conversation, was that the actual shoot at the OK Corral, the events that happen in the movie and the events that happen historically are more or less accurate, although how they happened and why they happened are perhaps more up for debate.
I'd agree with that statement.
Okay.
Because so part of the thing with the movie is the timeline is all kind of wrong and off.
Sure.
And I'm not going to go into a bunch of it because I am familiar with Tombstone, but as I take a broad approach to history, I did not memorize every single historical thing.
Right.
I'm good, but I'm not that good. I'm not like the Doctor good. Well, you know what? I take that back. I am the Doctor good. So take that for what you will, Doctor Who. And I'm talking like 7th Doctor too, like the sweet spot of Doctor Who.
Nice.
Or 10th, because I really like 10th.
Soon after seeing this movie, for unrelated reasons, I did not go specific purpose, but I ended up going to visit a friend in Arizona in the early 2000s, and so we went to Tombstone. And so they have some historical stuff there. And a lot of that was very much coached in, so you might have seen the movie, but, right? So that tells you kind of the impact that Tombstone had on popular consensus, or the actual Tombstone had to refute the movie.
Yeah. Because like the OK Corral, from right, is more like a 10 to 20 foot like alley where they have a shootout. Yeah. So it's not this big expansive thing. And if you go back and watch like the old movies from the 50s and 60s, it is just an open prairie. I think the first one they had, it's just like big open prairie, like no real buildings. They got some fences and they're shooting it out.
Yeah. And so I always had the impression of this movie as being, like you said, like an homage to historical events, which is slightly different than the other movies we've seen, which have been, let's take historical events and craft a explicitly fictional narrative. This is more, we're taking historical events and weaving a fictional narrative through them. And so it's a slightly different take on the material. So it's not a lot of the other stuff we've seen have been in some shape or form shaped by the Western genre, right? And initially, when I first watched it, I was like, "Oh, this is much more of a dramatic documentary functionally." Watching it again this time, I realized that's not actually true. This is way more shaped by the Western genre than I originally anticipated.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the context because I didn't watch many Westerns before 1993, right? So, like, I didn't know at the time.
Um, as I haven't looked at the note sheet until this morning, which for anyone that's curious, Eddie tried to pull a Chris to surprise me. He has like a quote up here that is not the quote he said, but
I
I
know.
am unflappable. So my flaps remain unflapped.
Unflapped. If you're curious, the quote I actually put, which to be fair, there's a lot of quotes in this movie I could have chosen from, is "Does this mean we're not friends anymore? You know, Ed, if I thought you were my friend, I just don't think I could bear it," which is one of my favorite lines, actually.
And you already cheated by the end of the other episode saying like, "I'll be your huckleberry." So you already like
Right,
sharing this moving your quotes left and right. You're
right,
not subtle, my friend. You're like Doc
right.
Holliday subtle.
Side note, actually, because I was curious about this, uh, there is historical precedent for the "I'm your Huckleberry" line. First of all, it's one of the most iconic lines from Tombstone. Like, people who have never seen or barely remember the movie will still know that's Val Kilmer saying that line. Um, but apparently, in this context, it is a shortening of or reference to the Southern phrase "huckleberry above the persimmon," which means to excel in something. So, what Doc Holliday is just saying is, simultaneously in the context, he's saying, "I will step up to your challenge," but he's also saying, "I can exceed your challenge. I am better than your challenge," which is an interesting little bit of context, but it's nice because their performance gives you all that context. You don't need to know, but it's nice to see that historically the context is actually still there.
And could be spoiler, but hands down, in my opinion, this is one of Val Kilmer's best roles he's ever played.
Yes. Right.
I know
Um,
it's hard to think though that his role in Real Genius as Chris Knight does not surpass his Doc Holliday, but I got to say Doc Holliday was better than Chris Knight.
yeah, or his performance in Top Gun, right.
There are a lot of people that would fight you over that one.
I know.
I am not one of them though.
No, no, no. Certainly, Doc Holliday is one of the pieces that people remember. Like, Bill Clinton, when he was president, loved the performance of Val Kilmer, Doc Holliday. Surprisingly, although Val Kilmer was nominated for an award for his performance, did not win one in the time. So
Did
it's
you
definitely
know
something I
that?
think that over time has begot more traction.
Did you know that he was not their first choice though to be
Really?
Doc Holliday?
No, who was?
Willem Dafoe, if memory serves, was their first choice to be Doc Holliday.
I can almost see that actually.
But it was because so there's no way we can talk about this movie without talking about Wyatt Earp. So I'm gonna put that there.
Right,
Um,
right.
one of the things was the like I think it was a distribution or for them trying to get money for the film. They couldn't get it because of like Wyatt Earp was running around and doing things, and so in the end, I think it was Disney that took it on, and Disney was like, "We don't want to work with Willem Dafoe because of like his other movies he's been in." I
Mm,
think he'd already done. I think it was it Last Temptation of Christ by now? Anyway, some other movies that Willem Dafoe would have been in because Willem Dafoe is an exceptional actor that takes a whole bunch of roles, and they're like, we don't like that, and so they said, okay, how about Val Kilmer? And they said, we love Val Kilmer too. So boom, Val Kilmer,
interesting. Okay. But yeah, Wyatt Earp was, when did he die? Like, fairly late.
like 1929 or so. There are movie
Right,
stars that knew him. Like there's a
right,
whole
right.
whole thing. Um, I don't know where you want to go because I didn't research this movie. I just know a lot of
Okay,
stuff about this movie,
okay.
and I'm trying
Do
not to.
do you know anything about the director drama of this movie?
How the original director was the guy I think that wrote Glory, and was director for about a month before they kicked him to the road.
Correct. But there's more than that actually. So yes, the scriptwriter, who's Kevin Jarre, it was going to be his first job as director, but he fell behind shooting schedules, so he was fired by the producer,
Mm.
replaced by George Cosmatos. And George Cosmatos was very hard-nosed, is the polite way of putting it. He was an asshole, apparently, and really led to a lot of conflicts with other crew members. Since then, Val Kilmer has said that he functionally directed the movie. I'm sorry, Kurt
Kurt
Russell.
Russell.
Kurt Russell functionally directed the movie. Sorry, Val Kilmer supported his stance somewhat. So I'm sorry, a few seconds. So Kurt Russell basically more or less kind of did it. And specifically, he started editing the script. He cut out some subplots and rewrote it to kind of emphasize the relationship between Wyatt and Doc. And then and that Cosmatos was kind of a quote unquote ghost director because Russell didn't want people to know that he was directing it. Val Kilmer, as late as 2020, said that Russell was working behind the scenes, and the most Kilmer would say that he essentially directed the movie, but Val Kilmer would not commit to saying he was the actual director. So there's a lot of debate about, even though Cosmatos' name is on it, how much he actually contributed to it beyond just pissing people off is open debate. But apparently, he was very adamant about the level of detail in the movie, and so a lot of the historical detail came with him, and that wasn't necessarily something that Kurt Russell's more focused apparently on getting the story right and getting to look right, whereas Cosmatos tends to work more with the producers on getting the right kinds of extras and historical detail and whatnot. So,
Now, this could just be internet rumor, but from my understanding, is that what happened is when they fired the other director, much how with Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte, Sidney Poitier stepped into the director's role and then like made Buck and the Preacher. Here, Russell sort of stepped into that role, and what I read is that he called Sylvester Stallone and was like, "Hey, who did you use when you directed Rocky and had someone else's name on it or something like that?" And so that's where Cosmatos comes in, and then he comes in, but he does all the technical work.
Right.
And like, because Kurt Russell has been an actor from since he was like 6 or 7.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of love, I think, on this podcast for Kurt Russell because Kurt Russell is amazing.
Yeah.
And was born to be in Westerns. There's just something about that guy.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So I can easily see how he could easily step in just from having been an actor for so long to help move the production along and take over some of the directing stuff, but not being able to do the technical pieces required of a director because that's not his skill set.
Right.
And I heard he came up with like hand signals or stuff that he would use with Cosmato is not to undercut him on the set.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that part.
So it's Cosmato's director, and he's like going, boop, 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 boop. I'm making hand signals to Eddie right now that no one else can see. They're totally irrelevant, but
yes,
it's the sound effects.
So it's interesting to me because knowing that and going in and watching the movie with a critical eye, I definitely have a different perspective of the movie than I did just as a casual, this is a movie I enjoy perspective. But like, it's really hard to overstate how impactful Tombstone was to at least a chunk of the popular culture, right? So financially, the budget was $25 million. It made $73.2 million. So like, it was a financial success. A lot of the
before you get into too much of that,
yeah,
I do want to take a step back for more director stuff.
Oh,
so do you want to do that now, or you?
No, okay. Yeah, go ahead. You can do it now.
Part of the thing is that originally Kevin Costner was supposed to be in this film.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So, but in the end, because Kevin Costner thought the film should be more focused on Wyatt Earp than it was, and Kevin Costner left, and there's no hard feelings. Kevin Costner left. Boom. And then Kevin Costner went off and got Lawrence Kasdan. Do you remember our buddy Lawrence Kasdan? Silverado.
Oh, okay.
To be the director and everything else. And they went off to go make Wyatt Earp the same time Tombstone was being made.
Okay.
Because Kevin Costner wanted a film just about like the life of Wyatt Earp. And so they ran off together to go make that film. Then Tombstone and Kurt Russell, who is essentially now in control of the movie, learned about the movie Kevin Costner was making, and one of the things I think they did is they went around Hollywood and they bought up like all the Western gear that you could get, like all the Western clothes and everything else that could be rented. They rented it all for the movie, forcing Wyatt Earp people to then have to like go overseas to get their costumes and stuff, which also pushed back the production timeline and the expense of Wyatt Earp.
Right.
So, which is why Wyatt Earp hits in like 94 versus Tombstone that hits at the end of 93. So there's a lot of contention between these two movies. And since they came out so close together, when reviews of these movies are done, people frequently compare the two.
Yep. I do remember that, and I do remember that Wyatt Earp does not come out favorably in the comparison.
No. Like I think Wyatt Earp had a budget of $50 or $60 million, and it made like maybe $50 million in the end.
Right. Right.
And like Siskel and Ebert, I think, never reviewed Tombstone, but they did review Wyatt Earp because I watched a video about them. It's like a minute clip, and they can constantly talked about how Wyatt Earp paled in comparison to Tombstone throughout their entire review.
Yeah,
so and they said that
mentioned
Tombstone got caught up in the holiday like momentum as Wyatt never really received any recognition. Sorry, you're saying.
No, yeah, right. Well, but to your point, like, I did read a quote from Ebert who's saying that they never got a review copy, right? So it's when they never reviewed it, and they weren't planning to, but he kept hearing from people about Val Kilmer's performance, and not just from one or two people, like constantly, everywhere he'd go, they assumed he had seen it, and they wanted to talk to him about Val Kilmer's performance. And he's like, "I haven't seen it." So yeah, it was one of the few movies that he proactively went out to watch outside of his job as a reviewer, because of just the hype that was generating. And which that leads to back to my original point, which is that there was a lot of it. Chris sent me a link to a Saturday Night Live sketch that made fun of Tombstone. There are Tombstone references in Sesame Street. I had not researched this, but I bet you if you looked at role-playing games before 1993 and role-playing games after 1993, the rules for pistol whipping would be dramatically increased after 1993, right? I think it's
everybody likes Little Buffaloing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I mean,
it's in Haunted West.
Yeah, see. This is definitely I think incorrectly called a cult classic because cult classic implies a movie that did not do well initially and grew appreciation later. I think this started with a strong appreciation and it moved into slightly niche status over time. But it was definitely a movie that benefited from VHS and later DVD rentals, right? It's up there with Monty Python in terms of quotes you'll probably hear at a role-playing game session before too long.
Yeah, and I know the quotes that you picked, but like one of my favorite quotes from this movie is Doc Holliday talking about Johnny Ringo, how he has a hole that you can't fill. Like that is a powerful and amazing quote for the whole movie.
Yeah, I mean, like as many as there are like fun quotes and memes, right? Like there's one chunk of the movie that I'm going to call out. That's like where I think is most of the heavy references kind of come from to the point where there are actual memes from it. But you're right. Some of the dialogue is actually really, really powerful too. Mine is just large chunks of the very, very end, which we'll talk about when we get there. I don't want to spoil too much, but like, really just a lot of dialogue between Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday is really, really strong. This is also one of the first movies I saw that showed me that strong male friendships were a thing that I wanted more of in media. Yeah. Because Russell was not wrong that is the heart of this movie. I think there are problems with the movie as a result of that focus. But certainly when I was watching it just without a critical eye, that very much struck me immediately, and it plays really well. And it's like I really do want more of this because it's rare in '93 to see a movie that's not about a toxic male relationship where they define the relationship around violence and arguing. I mean, they bicker and they joke with each other, but it's very clear there's so much affection between the two of them, and particularly Russell playing the traditionally male, gruff, I don't want to show emotion too much, but occasionally doing so, versus Kilmer playing, you know, uncaring about society's opinions of him and willing to say the things that men wouldn't normally say, is very, very powerful and a very good combination.
So there's going to be a lot of praise for this movie. One of the things I do want to put up front, though, is that this movie definitely portrays Wyatt Earp in a heroic vein. Wyatt Earp,
Right.
the man, was not a heroic person.
No, he's a jackass.
And they glossed over a lot of stuff to make it like that. And I know part of the thing is Russell was cutting the script, because one of the reasons it was being shot so slow, I think, is the original director who wrote it was trying to shoot things like John Ford, so big wide screens,
right,
because he knew there was so much movie that if the studio didn't have scenes to cut to, they had to keep in what he wanted. So that's why I think after a month they had like 4 minutes of footage or something obscene.
It was ridiculous, yeah. And actually, that brings up a good point too, is that we've been talking a lot about how a lot of the cinematography of movies up to this point in time have very roughly fallen into two camps, which is Ford or Leone, right? I mean, that's very reductive, but there's two distinctive Western styles, and a lot of Westerns seem to be kind of referencing and watching that. Silverado was the first time I had seen a movie, at least, that was like, oh, this is actually looks different than those two styles. But even Silverado, there's lots of nods to primarily the Ford school of cinematography, with a little nods to Leone here and there. And this one, to me, was the first one that felt like modern in the 93 sense movie, that didn't seem like it was drawing extensively from either of those visual schools. There's still love for both of them, but it seems like it's doing its own thing, that we started to see some of that synthesis happening in earlier movies. It seems like it's finally reaching a full form here with this movie, and arguably the last one we watched too. But anything else about the backgrounds of this before we dive in?
I'm trying to think of specific movie background bits versus historical background bits, because I can bring up some mystery stuff as we get to it, if we wanted to move more into the movie.
Okay.
So you said the movie made triple its budget, right?
Yes. Just under triple, but yeah.
I just wanted to point that again. So I can honestly say, having rewatched this now, I have never seen Wyatt Earp, the movie with Kevin Costner. This is the one that I saw.
I think I did after I saw this movie, and I remember almost nothing about it.
Because I was double checking the cast for Wyatt Earp in reference to this, and it was like Gene Hackman, like Dennis Quaid, and it's like I've never seen that movie from those actors, so I knew I never saw it.
Which tells you a lot.
And I do not regret my choice.
No. Okay. 1879. Members of an outlaw gang known to wear red sashes called the Cowboys are led by Curly Bill Brocus. They ride into a Mexican town and interrupt the local police officer's wedding. They then proceed to massacre the assembled policemen in retribution for killing two of their fellow gang members. Shortly before being shot, a local priest warns them that their acts of murder and savagery will be avenged, referring to the biblical four horsemen of the apocalypse. So, I'm going to stop there, because this scene distorted my memories of the movie to a surprising amount, right? Because going into it, I was like, "Oh, I remember Tombstone being a really diverse movie." It is not. It is just this scene, and there's one black guy in the background and one shot, because I noticed it.
Who, if you blink, you miss him. Yeah.
Yes. But it was the first time I had seen in a Western a Mexican town portrayed as more than just a collection of stereotypes. And so that distorted my memory of the movie. So like this one scene, it shows like a Mexican town is not a shithole. It's not a bunch of poor peasants. It's a thriving town that have police officers and different people in different occupations. It's comparable to the American town of Tombstone itself. So like it was a very cool scene from that perspective, but it is also the only amount of diversity we see in the whole movie. And it gets undercut by the fact that during the scene where they have a Mexican bandit with them to translate, they have the white guy translate the Spanish better. So it's like even that
Yeah.
undercuts the diversity of the scene.
Yeah, so the Cochise County Cowboys, one of the reasons they were so influential, they had so much like power, is that they would go and they would like horse wrangle or were rustlers, and they would take it from Mexico and then bring it up to Arizona. So that's why most of their
Mhm.
crimes originally was sort of like, it's all right because it's not us that they're stealing from
Right.
for a long
I can
time
see
until
that.
they have to start stealing from people in Arizona, and then it all sort of changed from that perspective. And so that's why they were so powerful, predominant, had so much money and influence, because they came down to Mexico or Mexican territory and they stole all their stuff to then bring it back. Did you
Right.
recognize the voice of the person doing the voiceover?
No, I didn't. Who is that?
You might know him from a little movie called Scrooge as a main executive that Frank works for.
Oh, okay.
Robert Mitchum, who was supposed to have been in this movie, but he like hurt himself on a horse stunt.
Oof. Okay. Yeah, I glossed over, but like, as opposed to a text scroll, this is a narrated. Uh, the history of the situation is narrated as opposed to a tank screen, and I think it's a slightly better way of doing it because they also show lots of different images, and they try to blend the old style film that actually exists with mocked up film with the actual actors. It's very
Yeah.
clear which are which. So like for 93, it's not a half decent attempt, right? But it's very clear like this is stuff that's new. This is stuff that's actually historical footage. But it's a nice way to kind of juxtapose those.
I won't do this for the entire thing, but some of the reduction in the writing and cuts that were made by Russell and whoever else was originally Robert Mitchum. I think this piece of the overview was like 7 pages that was in the original script.
Oh wow.
Could you imagine hearing Robert Mitchum read to you for 7 minutes as the movie sprawled on?
Oh,
And
people
they
would
were
get up
like,
and
nope,
leave.
snip, 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 snip,
Yeah,
snip.
which is I think smart, honestly. Um, but I did like the fact that they're doing a good job of reframing the Cowboys as they're not just generic bandits, but they are an organized crime syndicate functionally.
Yeah, that was a very nice touch.
Mhm. And so it was a nice way, and because they clarified the man who's shooting is a police officer, they're really helping to cement that the Mexicans are not the bad guys here; they are the victims. And again, I get frustrated with the fact that the one white bandit undercuts the only Mexican bandit in the Cowboys. But later on, they do explain that he's classically trained and speaks many languages, but it's still, I feel like they could have done that better. But again, it's helping to already subvert genre stereotypes.
And I'm trying to remember Johnny Ringo specifically off the top of my head, and I do not think Johnny Ringo is classically schooled. I think Johnny
No,
Ringo dropped out of high
probably not.
school. But one of the big things I love about the Old West, though, is that you don't need to be classically trained in school. You can pick up a lot of the languages and everything else. Because in Haunted West, one of the things they did was everyone has a percentage of languages just from how many people you encounter, interact with from all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something I actually liked. Again, I don't like how it resonates, but the idea that there is more than one person in the gang who speaks Spanish because they go to Mexico regularly felt logical to me and still does. Um, and so I understand now, looking at it analytically, that scene is there to help people translate because in 93, subtitles were seen as a thing to avoid. Now I think they would probably just have the whole scene in Spanish and everyone's speaking Spanish, right?
Yeah. Did you feel some Django with their red sashes?
A
Or did
bit,
you
a bit.
feel, or God, what was the name of the movie? I think that was like a gang movie that came out in 92 or 90 that had red. Oh, was it the Crips and the Bloods? I can't remember. But there you go, red sashes.
Yeah, no, I mean, the way that they were portrayed and handled, again, like they do a clever job of nodding to modern iconography to help audiences, and so like it very much felt like gang colors,
Yeah.
and the way that it was handled and referenced, and you see later little references like anybody I see wearing a red sash, I'll kill them, and people throwing the red sashes down. So lots of nice visual ways to indicate allegiance or membership of it, but again, playing on, but not actually appropriating or explicitly referencing modern gang color iconography.
Yeah. A delicate balance to walk.
Yeah, it is. It is. Another reference to Death Riding a Pale Horse. So
Just can't get away from it.
can't get away from it. Anything else about this scene?
No, not the scene. I'm good. It was nice to see some diversity for like a split second, though, even though it's all gunned down and killed.
For a moment, yeah. And then a lot of white after this. Wyatt Earp, a retired peace officer with a notable reputation, reunites with his brothers Virgil and Morgan in Tucson, Arizona, where they venture towards Tombstone to settle down. There they encounter Wyatt's longtime friend Doc Holliday, who is seeking relief in the dry climate for his worsening tuberculosis. Josephine Marcus and Mr. Fabian are also newly arrived with a traveling theater troupe. Meanwhile, Wyatt's common-law wife, Maddie Blaylock, is becoming dependent on laudanum. That's covering a large chunk of movie, actually, but it is all a lot of scene setting, right? From a plot perspective, the next, 20 minutes of movie is just establishing the cast, because it's a fairly large cast. And like we talked about with a little bit with Silverado, was that taking the time to establish each character and how they relate to each other. It is good to spend that time up front because it makes a movie stronger, ideally, at the end. I think this movie is a good example of that. It's the first we meet Wyatt, then Wyatt meets his two brothers, and we see the two brothers against each other. Then we see the respective women who are associated with the brothers and how they relate to each other. And then we introduce Doc Holliday into that. And so, I think it's a good way of playing all of that. That said, go ahead.
Did you know that there were two other Earp brothers?
I actually did not know that. No.
Yeah. That were not super important, so they cut them, but they were there. They came, they worked in the saloon and some other places, and you'll never. Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, but I mean, I also see why, whether before when this movie was first written or afterwards when it was cut, I could see why it's just reduced the brothers down to 3, and even make an argument for 2 in some cases.
So I'm going to say that's more Bill Paxton. No offense to Bill Paxton.
Fair.
I don't necessarily think he was the best choice for the role.
I mean, to be honest, this movie is why I like Sam Elliott as an actor, honestly, right? And so when you have Kurt Russell and Sam Elliott and Val Kilmer, there's just not much room left, I mean, they take up a lot of space.
You need someone that has a level of gravitas that I don't think he had at that point in his career to stand in that with the 3 of them.
Right. Yeah.
Because the other big part about some of the cutting of the scenes is that I only mention it because you mentioned Sam Elliott, is that when they're cutting stuff, Sam Elliott, I think, said, "I will kill you if you cut any of my lines." So his lines are not cut or changed.
Which is so funny because Sam Elliott, as a person, is apparently one of the most pacifist, nicest guys in the world, but he has the reputation of being scary and evil, which is so funny.
Because he's a ghostwriter, Eddie.
Fair, right? Also, if you had told me prior to this recording that there were 2 Westerns in 1993 and both of them had Billy Zane in them, I would have called you a liar. I was not prepared for this percentage of Billy Zane. I had forgotten he was in this movie, frankly, But I was just we just watched another movie with Billy Zane with a pranker. It's Billy Zane again. What the hell?
It is the 90s. He was everywhere.
He was everywhere. I had forgotten how ubiquitous he was, but he was everything.
I was almost moved enough to pull him up and look his IMDb page and try to find out why he was not more successful, because he keeps popping up in everything and
right.
Okay. You briefly cruised over the wives, both legal and common law, of the Earps.
Right.
I want to take a minute to talk about Maddie Blaylock, because we may not talk about her again.
Yes.
When they ask, "How did you meet her?" and Kurt Russell's Wyatt says the old way, undercuts so much of that shadiness of fucking Wyatt Earp, because Wyatt Earp was a bouncer, a Buffalo person. Maddie Blaylock in the old way was a sex worker who worked for Wyatt Earp.
Wow. Okay.
Did you know she was a sex worker? Because she was a sex worker.
I didn't know that. I mean, to be fair, we have reached a point in this run where if I see a woman on screen with speaking lines, I'm assuming she's a sex worker because that's pretty much been every role that a woman has had in most of these movies.
So this is me trying to remember, but I think Josephine, who, spoiler, but if you've already watched the movie to talk with, it's not a spoiler.
Right.
And Wyatt gets married, and then I think Josephine and Wyatt go out of their way to erase Maddie from existence. And it wasn't until, what was that, like 30 or something, or sorry, I think it was in the 50s, a researcher discovered Maddie Blaylock, who committed suicide due, I think, to Wyatt Earp. It brought all that back out because there was a popularized version of a book that came out in the 30s that sort of idolized Wyatt Earp, and that's why we have all these positive opinions of him now.
Right.
So, not a good guy at all. And this.
And I will say, right, like, yes, obviously this movie is taking a more heroic approach to Wyatt Earp. But one of the things I was going to get into later, but yeah, let's get into it now because I probably won't get into it again. Maddie Blaylock in this movie, clearly gets fucked over, right?
Yeah.
Because she is a laudanum addict, even though she claims it's for headaches. But the way it is coded and the way it's shot, it's very clear she's addicted to laudanum. And Wyatt Earp does nothing with this. And in no way, shape, or form shows any repentance or concern about her addiction. More or less just stops paying attention because someone more pretty comes into town. Literally, it's a chunk of the movie. Someone pretty comes into town. He stares at her. We find out this is the actual romance subplot. And the movie does nothing to apologize about the fact that Wyatt Earp just fucking leaves her.
And I think I think Maddie was his third wife. Hence why you also have Doc talking about Wyatt being an oak. It's
right. Yeah, and that's one thing that I do like about this movie is that to go back actually to Wyatt and Doc, from the first moment they start talking, you believe they are old friends, right?
Yeah.
And one of it is that level of Doc able to undercut Wyatt and vice versa, right? Like at one point in time when Wyatt invites, I think it's the mayor over, and Doc's like, "Piss on you, Wyatt," right? Like, it's very clear that they know how to get under each other's skin in a way that only friends can really do.
When he invites the Marshal over.
Marshal over, okay. As Marshal in America, very much, yes. But it was right, yes, because have you met the infamous Doc Holliday? That was right, yeah. So like, yes, and then again, Doc going, yeah, oh yes, Wyatt, you're an oak, which becomes a running bit. But all that said, like, as much as a minute ago I was praising, like, this is a large cast, they're taking time to establish it up. From an analytical perspective, this cast is too large. There are way too many characters in this.
Because all their subplots get cut.
Right. And that gets a big part of it. And because of how this movie put together, they probably had already hired and paid for actors, so it's like we should put them on screen, but we've cut their subplots, so we have a fair number of characters who don't really go anywhere, and Maddie is one of them, sadly.
And I do want to take a beat because we're looking at like Russell and Sam Elliott and everyone else, and they're bringing like the presence and gravitas, but I want people to really know that like the actual people themselves are maybe mid-20s to early 30s primarily. They were young people, not like these late 30s up. Sam Elliott, what, 50?
Yeah.
They were not old like this. They were young.
And like, I do feel like this is a case where quite often older actors are hired to play younger men. We talked about this during James Bond run, with Roger Moore specifically. God, he was old. But the way they act, that does track, right? Because again, one thing in the movie that surprised me at the time is that yes, this is a heroic to Wyatt, but Wyatt still portrays an asshole for a large chunk of this movie, right? He basically throws somebody out. We're almost to this point movie, but to just kind of slightly took the next turn.
Why
Real
don't,
quick.
if you don't want to talk about that, we can talk about when we first meet Wyatt and what he does, the guy whipping the horse.
Oh yes, yeah, right, yeah. Where like a guy's whipping his horse and he takes it and immediately whips the guy back. Hurst, don't it? You know, which is a great line, but also he's beating the employee of the train company because he don't like how he's treating his horse.
Yeah.
Right.
He's an asshole. Now, that is a great way to ingratiate you to the character because they're trying to help an animal out. But
right. And I think that's important because, to be honest, for half the film, Wyatt Earp is not going to act like the heroic stereotype that we have of him. And I think it's a smart move, right? Wyatt is very reluctant to get engaged with the actual plot of the movie. And so what we're left with here, what I'm left with here, I should say, is being surprised that a Western can have complicated, nuanced characters. The cowboys start off as pretty cartoonishly evil, but they'll change over time. The Wyatts are seen as kind of self-centered, and Doc is just a dilettante. And so it's like it's but you're right. Like by having the horsewhipping scene, it's okay. This is the person I'm supposed to cheer for, even if he's complicated, right?
yeah.
Now, I say this having watched a bunch of Westerns with you, I realized that complicated characters in Westerns is by no means an invention of 1993, right?
Yeah.
But it's the first time I noticed it because I was so used to, again, we talked before, the stereotypical Western. This is very much not that. But now I see this as an evolution of what previous people have been doing for decades to show that there is complexity and nuance in the Western genre. This is another stab at that.
Billy Bob Thornton.
I was working talking about this.
Who so showing you like how the timeline is kind of all over the place. They showed up, the Earps originally go to Tombstone, I want to say 78, 79, how the movie depicts, but they were going there, I think, to start a stagecoach business or something like that.
Okay.
But it was already so well established, they didn't have the funds. They had to sell what little they had. And so eventually, like around 80, 81, then they try to like move into gambling and everything else. But they show up in 78, 79 here. That scene that they pull there happens like in 81 or 82, I think. So already like time, snip, 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 snip. I think Doc Holliday shows up in like 80, 81. Time is irrelevant. Loops on itself. But that character, I think, had a larger subplot too. So I don't want the movie to be longer because it would definitely not have been successful if it was longer.
No.
But something's off right now. It's on this.
So
you can feel it.
I can tell you how much damage was done because when Billy Bob Thornton was hired after the script started getting cut up, actually. And he was told, "You're a bully, go." He was not given any lines. So that entire exchange between Wyatt Earp and the dealer was ad-libbed, including the skin that smoke wagon line.
Which is amazing. But that's also because one of the things I know is Kurt Russell said that he was cutting a lot of Wyatt's material because he can convey it in like a word or two or like a look. Right. And so he was trying to make sure Wyatt stuff got cut to give other people room because of the large cast, which is one of the many reasons I fucking love Kurt Russell. Like,
and apparently
I can't see Kevin Costner doing that.
No, absolutely not. And Billy Bob Thornton was pretty nervous about taking on the role because I don't know, I've never worked in Western before, and so like what I understand is that he actually worked to get some of the patter down and some of the dialogue down so it can kind of make it sound more authentic. He's like, you don't overthink it. And so when they got to that confrontation, they were just both so in the zone. But it wasn't. It was basically literally like Russell was kind of under directing him. He was like going, "Don't just be yourself. We'll get the dialogue, get the patter down. We'll do a couple of takes." And then they went with more or less the first take, from what I understand.
Yeah. And just
especially
like,
oh my god, my kids could do better than you, right? Thing like apparently Billy Bob was like, that's not a very good line. No, that's perfect. That's awesome, man. What are you talking about?
And like even the one of the most iconic moments for Russell is in that scene where he says like, "You're gonna do something. You're gonna stand there and bleed." Like, oh, yeah.
Right. So I mean, knowing that helps me because I've always had I think a lot of people have affection for this scene, right? But I think kind of what's ultimately happening here is we're getting the energy of the actors and the characters in a way that will slowly build. Because like with the except the dealer is not part of the cowboy, so like with a large chunk of this movie, even though there's a brief villain, i.e., the dealer, and then of course he's basically cowed into submission when he finds out Doc Holiday's there and has to put down his gun. Oh, I'm sorry, are you still here? You may go. Right, like he's completely defeated.
He
But
didn't
it
he didn't
allowed
have a gun, Eddie. He had a
a
shotgun.
shotgun,
Shotguns are
right,
game changers. Like that's
right. And Doc Holliday literally just talked him out of his shotgun, right? And it's why I was like, "Oh, just leave the gun here," right? But still, but it allows you to have a mini villain to get the characters and the energy across of it. And again, it helps that it is really about Doc and Wyatt's friendship. So the other characters are ultimately written to kind of support that dynamic, and that dynamic just clicks so hard, right? Like the chemistry those two have is unreal on the screen.
And it's also a chance to show you that Wyatt doesn't necessarily have to use like guns or primarily physical violence. There's a little bit
Right.
of physical violence in there, but it's primarily him talking him and getting him to do what he wants him to do.
That's a good point. We've been tracking how violence tells what kind of Western story you have, and this is one that where it started off very violent, but it was very one-sided violence, and so now we're seeing that like the movie's phrasing that violence is in this universe a last resort, and that these iconic characters don't use violence as their go-to move.
And so one of the things I keep talking about Haunted West for this movie, but one of
Yeah.
the things that Haunted West I also included was like debate. Essentially, that would have been the debate for Haunted West that Wyatt
Yep.
would have won because he wanted him to leave, and in the end, he bested him and he left. But there are also consequences for that, which are then resolved by the introduction companion.
Right.
Oh,
But and again, like to kind of showcase what this movie is doing specifically, Wyatt gets rid of the dealer who's clearly abusive and a problem, and immediately asks for a cut, basically asks to get paid. What do you think? 25%? Sound fair to you? And so like shows that Wyatt's not doing this out of altruism. He's very self-centered at this stage of the movie. And arguably the whole movie, but
yeah, his whole existence.
right.
Because one of the things is there's also eventually when he becomes a dealer, he also cheats when he's dealing car. It's a whole thing. Wyatt Earp is not a good dude, but that's the complexity of the West, just like the West itself, because you would have law people in one town who were villains and like criminals and outlaws in another town.
Right.
So that's part of like the mystique and the allure that so many people have for Westerns is the complexity of the life that people lead. Like everyone.
Yeah. And this was my first window into that. But like we said, like even going back to like the Lobo comics, right? You can see even in a kid's comic in the 60s, it's touching with the complexity of character on some level. Like, Lobo's a good guy, but everyone sees him as a villain. We're seeing that this is very much a 90s take on that kind of moral complexity. So like for me, knowing almost nothing, I was like, oh, Wyatt Earp's not the good guy I thought he was. And then I found actual history and it's like, oh no, he's actually way worse than this movie presents him, right? But still, I was expecting a much more traditional approach to Wyatt Earp, and this movie is actually not doing that. So it's like it's interesting kind of half step between the legend and the reality.
Yeah.
There,
you mentioned so much. I'm trying to figure out specifically. Is there anything else I want to leave? Billy Zane. I'm not sure if it's going to be the notes later, but the Cochise Cowboys watching Billy Zane on stage, giving his performance.
Yep.
Hilarious. Scary because they're shooting guns in an inside environment. So I'm mentioning the gunfiring here. That was okay. I don't know for a reason. They're like shooting at him on stage, shooting up in the air. Law enforcement does nothing.
Yep.
But we also have Jason Priestley's characters making lovey-dovey eyes at Billy Zane on stage.
That's actually a good point. Yeah, because I don't think we're gonna touch on the subplot much. I remember that his character's name actually, but it definitely presents homosexuality as a factor at this time period, and he is made fun of, but not necessarily because of his homosexual interests. I think if he had been lovey-dovey towards a woman, he would have gotten the exact same kind and amount of ribbing.
Yeah. Essentially, he's the geek amongst a bunch of jocks, is why
Right.
he's being made fun of.
Exactly. Yeah. It's because he's a nerd. It's not because he's gay.
And I wanted more of it because there was so much of that in the West, and it is rarely ever touched on at all. And this was a bit of a chance to like fully go into it. And I want to know if that was in the movie and then got cut too. But I'm glad they at least kept a nod to it because it was fucking huge and everywhere.
I will, because we'll talk about it a little bit when we get there, but just to kind of, in case I don't, it's also relevant that is an actual character arc. It's short, right? But when Billy Zane's character gets killed, that character changes his allegiance as a result, So he was in love with that actor. And when the actor was killed, he takes issue with what the Cowboys are doing as a result, right? So it's not just even queer baiting. Like it's an actual told miniature, but an actual love story.
Which makes me think there has to be more of it that might have got cut.
Right. So like I was surprised at the time, and watching it again, I was like, I was going, this maybe was way cringier than I remember. And I'm watching it, I was like, no, actually, this is a very nice, sweet little story here.
They should have given more room.
Okay. Anything else?
That was it. I had to make sure I touched about that because that was super important. And
there's more thing. So we introduced the Marshal, and the Marshal is very much in the vein of the Marshal we saw in the last movie, actually. Someone who's an up and comer, kind of the guy who runs the town, as it were. And there's a casual reference to him being the captain of the Anti-Chinese League, right? And every time I get to that bit, I love it because it's doing a few things at once. It's a historical thing, a thing that actually existed, right? And the way he slips it in, it feels very natural, like this is a normal thing, but also helps act as a clue to the audience, like, you're not going to like this guy. Just be ready, And turns out he's an asshole, right? But we don't know that yet. So it's a nice little kind of clue of like, we're giving you a hint that this is one of the villains of the piece that's coming up by just throwing it in. But it's also an actual historical detail. So it's like, it's a great way of like going, these people actually existed. But also, because we're watching it from 93 perspective, we aren't going to like that. Again, with the horse racing scene, we don't like that as the audience. So that gives us a certain way to calibrate our expectations of the characters.
And there are a whole bunch of laws that were put in place to hamper the Chinese immigration that had occurred. Because part of the thing was, for when they're building the railroads, they needed more and more workers. So they would bring over Chinese people who would come over, they would work, and under horrible environments work, so they could potentially make money to send back, so they could bring their families over. And that was big. And after that boom was kind of done, that's when the government really stepped in and tried to quash all of that, send people home, make it harder for people to immigrate into the country. And there were leagues against Chinese people. In the South, some people tried to then turn Chinese people into indentured servants to replace some of the free black people that got to leave. It is horrible and like thrown away in a line.
Yeah. And that's what this movie does a lot of, because again, like going back to when I first watched it, it made me want to learn more, because I felt the historical, even though this is nowhere near remotely accurate, I felt the historical resonance of a lot of the lines and bits of the movie that made me want to find out, this feels like a thing. And it turns out it was a thing, right? The movie's really good about using history to shape how they want the audience to feel and how the plot goes.
Yeah.
Which is something we have not seen a ton of. We've seen some, but not a ton of. Like Buck and the Preacher does that, but also that's like the main plot is that historical detail, right? This is using smaller historical details to scaffold and shuff around the plot a bit more. So it's the same thing, but different perspective.
Gives me a chance to shout out a TV show that if you haven't seen it, there's only 3 seasons. I think each season is about 10 episodes. You should go check out Warrior. Warrior is a great Western
I've heard good things.
Series. If you haven't seen it, it talks about Asian immigrants, like they're in San Francisco and everything they go through. It is awesome. It's like a crime, action, drama, historical piece, Western.
I've been meaning to see if I can find another way to get that through in the UK. I think it's on now, but anyway.
So just
Cool.
to shout that out.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So Wyatt and his brothers begin to profit from a stake in a gambling emporium and saloon when they have their first encounter with the Cowboys. As tensions rise, Wyatt is pressured to help rid the town of the Cowboys, though he's no longer a lawman. After a visit to an opium den, Curly Bill begins shooting erratically in the street. Marshal Fred White attempts to disarm him, only to be shot dead. Wyatt takes Curly Bill into custody, fending off both a mob attempting to lynch the cowboy and a handful of his brethren seeking to free him. Curly Bill stands trial but is found not guilty due to lack of witnesses. Virgil, unable to tolerate the chaos, becomes the new marshal and imposes a weapons ban within city limits.
And so, where would you like to go for this historically inaccurate piece of time?
So, let's start at the beginning, which is where So Wyatt Earp's doing. I believe it's Pharaoh. He has a Pharaoh table, right?
Yes. Pharaoh
not poker because Doc explicitly talks shit about it, but I don't remember if it was actually a Pharaoh table or not.
It was. It's supposed to be Pharaoh. It's where he cheats.
Right. So the Cowboys come in and confronts Wyatt, who's now the Pharaoh dealer. And again, probably not historically accurate, but two cowboys talking shit in Latin is fucking badass.
It is great because that is like the legendary killer Johnny Ringo going off against Doc Holliday. Beautiful, unbelievably well executed. Like Doc Holliday was someone who would have been classically educated, but I don't think it was Latin. I think it was like some other languages. But that scene is gold, hands down.
Yeah, right. And while not historically accurate, to your things about like Haunted West, it does show that extremely educated people also were in this space, and they weren't all just savage, ignorant people, right? And so, in a way, that makes the Cowboys more terrifying because they know exactly what they're doing. And Ringo is not just a blood-crazed psychopath; he is an intelligent blood-crazed psychopath.
Yeah.
And then, they go right into the gun tricks, which is very Western thing. And then Doc doing it with the cup is just, I love that scene so much.
Because not only is it de-escalating like for the entire scene, but it's also insulting and humiliating for Ringo at the same time. So,
But it's funny because, like, again, we haven't really seen the Cowboys much until this reintroduction of them. And what starts to happen is, while in front of the Wyatts, so this isn't like behind the scenes, as it were, we start to see that the dynamic between the Cowboys is not as obvious as it first appeared, right? We see a lot of Curly Bill kind of joking, but clearly concerned by what Ringo does. Like, come on, Ringo. Like, laughs like, come on, that's crazy, But also very undercurrent of like, no, seriously, Ringo, stop it. Right? So Curly Bill and Ringo there's not quite a fight for leadership so much as Curly Bill going, I have to stay on top of this stuff because this guy will murder way too many people if I don't.
So I don't think it's a fight for leadership like Megatron and Starscream. I think it's more of, if you are the leader of a gang and you want, because this is the town that you're operating out of, you need to be able to live and do shit in that town without being killed. So if you have a maniac killer on your team, you got to rein that guy in. Otherwise, you can't be in this town enjoying like the booze, the liquor, and everything else that you want.
Right. And so...
But you can't get rid of him because you need him.
And this is one of the cases where the ensemble cast actually does really great work because, yes, obviously, those two characters, Ringo and Doc Holliday are like kind of the center of that confrontation. But there's also lots of cuts to both Curly Bill and Wyatt Earp of them getting nervous that these two will, for various different reasons, are happy to go to violent extremes. And it's like, so the respective friends / leaders, whatever, are trying to also ready to step in to de-escalate, although Doc does end up being one de-escalating. It's like there's a tension there that's not just, are these two people going to fight, but rather those two, and by extension, the rest of the supporting cast going, this is going to go really badly if these two go off.
Because even the character they built for Doc up to now shows you that Doc is not afraid to get in a fight, but it is not his preferred method. He'd rather just humiliate you and take your money and move on.
Right.
Even our introduction to Doc has that.
And so another interesting piece of that is, again, Val Kilmer apparently wrote a whole book in 2020 about at least some of his work on, because I think it's called "I'm Your Huckleberry" or something like that. It's like he wrote extensively about his experience working on Tombstone, and one of the quotes from that book I read was that he always saw this movie as a condemnation of gun violence in the United States, which is a bit weird considering the movie ends with a bunch of people shooting each other for vengeance. So, like, it's not quite the condemnation I think he believes it to be. But you can see some of that in this scene, right? You could see that. I could see kind of where Val Kilmer maybe drew that from. Is the between this and also the earlier scene of him talking someone out of his shotgun. You can see that Doc Holliday is someone who doesn't want to use guns for whatever reason. He would much rather play poker, drink, and die of tuberculosis. Um,
And we also
and
get that in his first scene with Big Nose Kate, where he's gambling. He puts his guns on the table so they can all be friends, but then draws them back again if needed.
Right. Yep. And whereas Ringo would very much like to solve this with violence, please, thank you. So it's interesting that, like, no one's saying these things. At no point does Doc say, "I really don't want to use violence." At no point, no, Ringo does actually say he wants to murder people, but in a very distinctly Ringo way. Um, we're not being told character motivations. It's all in not even the lines, but in how they're playing them. So it's a lot of, like you said before, when Russell's saying, I can cut these lines out because I can get across in the emotions." That's happening through a lot of the cast. A lot of the people are taking relatively mundane, innocuous lines and playing them with a level of emotion and sometimes gravitas, sometimes humor, but you're always getting another a layer from it. So, like, it's genuinely gripping, fantastic acting. Because if you looked at the script, it would just be a bunch of weird inanities.
And I remember, I think, hearing Val Kilmer talk in an interview about how they brought in like a vocal coach to teach him the language that he's using here. It's like the original one they had that they wanted me to do was so slow that we would have all been there for 4 years. So he
Nice.
riffed on the one that they kind of wanted him to do, and it is pitch perfect. I love it so much.
Yeah, because he does a great job of throwing away colloquialisms. I mean, I'm Huckleberry is kind of the most iconic one, right? But it's a good representative example, which we're not to that actual line yet, but just because it's so well known. Um, he's not putting emphasis on the fact that it is a strange phrase to modern ears. He's saying it like it's perfectly natural language. And Val Kilmer does a lot of that, particularly in this scene. He's using a lot of contemporary colloquialisms for 1879, but saying them like he would say normal mundane speech, which is actually a fairly tricky line when you're doing an accent on top of all that. It's a fairly tricky line to do. That's one of the reasons why I think Kilmer's performance is so evocative, particularly in this chunk of the movie.
And I'm not sure if it'll come up later, but where we have Lowell from Wings saying that he's drunk, and he places you see two of me, and that's when he pulls out. That's okay because I've got two guns, one for each of you. Oh, it's so amazing! Like, great lines, great delivery, great acting.
Right. I've noticed this later, but talk about it now. It does lead to, from an 30 years on perspective, these lines are so well known and so quoted. In retrospect, it feels to me when I'm watching it like it's a bunch of catchphrases, but I know that's not true. They became catchphrases because of this movie.
Because they were so good.
So, like, it's not what he's doing, but it does. I have to intentionally a few times, like, here's the part where he says the bit, right? And it's like, but they weren't, that just, he did them so well that people gravitated to so many of these lines. And to be clear, also, while Val Kilmer and Stella, all of the cast are doing this, I mean, there's Russell's "Hell's Coming With Me." There's the now very memed, Powers Booth going, "Well, bye." I mean, like, it's these are not always dramatic lines, but they're presented in such iconic ways that it's hard to look back at the movie and not see it for its constituent parts at times, And this scene, again, the chunk of the movies has a lot of those components. Although there's a bit later where it's there's a mass, there's a density.
Curly Bill on the street shooting up in the
Yes.
air draws law enforcement, but Curly Bill and the Cochise Cowboys shooting in an inside of a building at an actor draws no law enforcement attention.
Yep.
I think that is a script discrepancy, is my thought, is what that was. Like the one on
So
the street is more historically accurate
right.
versus the one in the building. Because there would have been gun laws in Tombstone.
Right. I mean, I had always chalked up some inconsistencies to an attempt to try to bring as much of the original material in. Now watching it analytically, I think that you're right. They were cutting and revising, and so it led to a pretty strong consistency of who was in charge when, right? I mean, the overall thrust of the law enforcement here is absolutely corrupt, and the Cowboys can do whatever the hell they want is pretty clear throughout even this version of the movie. So like, it's not that it's lost or anything, but you're right. Like, there were gun laws because otherwise, why would they have to go out to stop him when he was shooting his guns? But then there's a major plot point where Virgil imposes gun ban. It's like there was a gun ban. That's why he got shot.
All right. Let's do all this at once. So we have the scene with Curly Bill where he shoots a deputy marshal. And for the movie, that's when I think the mayor or the marshal put in a gun law on Virgil, and like they have Virgil and fucking Bill Paxton. I don't remember the name. That's how small the role feels.
Right.
Go and become deputies, which is not true because if I remember right, Virgil had already been a deputy for like a while before those gun laws were put in because the Earps needed money and he went back into law enforcement to make money. I think Wyatt was also law enforcement then because he needed money. And there was a whole thing between historically Wyatt and the marshal about trying to get the job that the marshal has in town because I think the marshal gets like a 10% cut from the silver from the mines annually. And Wyatt wanted money.
Okay.
But I think there was a deal that the marshal and Wyatt struck where he said, hey, if you drop out of the race, we can split the income 50-50. And the marshal does not do that when he wins. So there's this whole other dynamic going on. And like the gun law that was put in happened like 6 to 12 months after the deputy here, Harry Carey, I think, was shot. So like I said, they took facts, they shook them up in a blender, and they reduced the time down and poured it back out to this movie.
I will say that there is an implicit time jump here, although it does require close watching of a couple of lines because when they are shooting pool for the first time, no, it's when they're in the bar. They make comments that he was tried and found not guilty because no one's witnessed the shooting, right? So it implied there was time enough for Curly Bill to, after being arrested, being taken for trial, going through trial, and then having a trial thrown out. But probably not in the scale of a year. It's probably implied more like a few weeks. Now, to step back a bit, the shooting of Marshall Fred White. Weirdly, one of my favorite scenes in the movie because there's so many scenes that people love. This is actually one of my favorite ones. Partially because the shooting someone with your gun upside down thing when I was younger was like, that's just cool, right? It's like I was in my 20s ish, so it's like, yeah, that's really cool, that's awesome, so like, and I tried to work it into role-playing games because I was that kind of nerd. So it's like, yeah, it's a cool thing. But even after my first watch of it, and I'm realizing now, Curly Bill's shock at what happens, right? Because Curly Bill is high. He is high on opium. Which, side note, the other thing about this movie is they talk a lot about how prevalent drug use is in this time period too, which is a way that I had not seen in previous Westerns. But Bill is high as hell. And so like when he's laughing, going, yeah, sure, for sure, Fred, here you go. When the shot happens, in the moment you're thinking, oh, he was just being an asshole. But no, he genuinely was like gonna give his guns over, and he doesn't know how that gunshot happens, right? So like it's a bit of trauma. Like Curly Bill's not in complete control of things. But of course, because the Cowboys have to escalate because of who they are and how they're perceived, Curly Bill kind of gets swept up in it, which is an interesting plot. That the more I watch it, the more I see that Curly Bill's not in control of things after this point. It's subtle, but it's something after a few watches you start to see, like the way he acts and the way he says things and does things. He's like, I kind of ride the horse. I'm not sure when I can jump off after this point.
I'm in partial agreement with you because I'm totally there. He was either, I know the movie says opium, but I think historically it might have been opium, might have been alcohol. But either way,
Right.
out of his gourd. And there is no reason where he would have shoot to kill the deputy there who is not really part of them, but lets him do a whole bunch of shit. So that's the thing of like, I know I'm super high, so sure, here are my guns. And it was that incident that changed it. But it's the fact that you get our lynching mob, like let's give him some Western justice to lynch him, then to have all the Cowboys come in to like attempt to escalate things again. So that you get a chance for Wyatt to be a hero and have his big heroic moment, and you have like the other Earps coming in and everything else to establish a fair trial. It's a good scene. There's some good dynamics, but the time jump that is there, that is sort of glossed over, is very disruptive.
I agree, combined with the fact that on this watch, I really feel like Virgil should have been the one to knock him out. I think that would have made more sense.
So really, Virgil would have been the leader because he was the older brother back then. And so a lot of the stuff that Wyatt had done may have not been there, but Virgil would have had a more active role leading their group of brothers.
Right.
But it's not called Virgil.
Right. Even when Wyatt's confronted about, hey, why did you do that? His answer is not really very good. And the movie tries to play it off as Wyatt is kind of knee-jerk a good guy and he's working against his own inner instincts, which is not a bad way to play it, right? But I think the way the rest of the movie flows, it would have made more sense if Virgil had knocked him out. Then it makes sense a little more why Virgil becomes the marshal. And Wyatt kind of going the whole time protesting, going, no, I don't want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. So his turn to become law enforcement makes a little more sense. Whereas here, it's like you have the kind of thing of he's inclined to intercede, but then makes a lot of protestation about not being. It's not bad, but it's something more I noticed. It's like if Virgil had been the person to knock out Curly Bill here, I think it would have flowed better story wise.
Yeah. But doesn't Wyatt need to resist the call, I think, 3 times, Eddie?
God, yeah. That's
to go on his Campbellian journey.
I stand on the side of Campbell has ruined movies, which I know puts me at odds with the people, including some friends of mine. Some good friends of mine are really strong Campbellian people, but don't like it.
It's been a while since I had a chance to talk about Campbell with you.
God, fuck Joseph Campbell. The other thing that annoys me about this chunk of the movie is, again, I think Virgil worked better because what the scene we have is that Wyatt intercedes, like I said, the Cowboys try to escalate, and Virgil is one of the key people to try to talk them down. But he's the whole time going, we shouldn't get involved, we shouldn't get involved, we shouldn't get involved. The only reason why he's helping talk them down is because he wants to not get killed, right? But then, as the movie presents it, Virgil goes out in the streets, sees a woman with a scar, and decides to become marshal. And it sat with me real bad this time around. Because it's like, oh no, this pretty woman has a scar. I now must become a marshal. And it's just like, it wasn't anybody you knew, right? And he explains it as like, I'm tired of seeing people treat like this. And I get that's supposed to be a metaphor for him they're trying to collapse him seeing all this atrocity. But it's like, you did see this atrocity earlier in your casino 10 minutes ago in the movie, right? We didn't need to have that scene. So if Virgil had just knocked him out and then we'd gone to the reveal, it would have made more sense. It's like, I couldn't stand by when I knocked him out. And that led to me taking up a badge. So they're cutting around a lot of stuff. And that was one of the points where I saw the cuts pretty clearly.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Nah, I'm good.
Okay. Ike Clanton flouts the new gun ban and gets arrested. This leads to a gunfight in the OK Corral in which Billy Clanton and the McClary brothers are killed. Virgil and Morgan are wounded, and the allegiance of County Sheriff Johnny Bean of the Cowboys is made clear. It's short, but also it's covering the entire OK Corral fight and plus lead up and fallout from that.
I mentioned originally Wyatt and Behan, specifically because I think Ike was not a Cochise cowboy. He was a Cochise cowboy sympathizer who owned a ranch, who Wyatt, when he was trying to become marshal so he could get a stake, 10% of the silver, went to make a deal with him that like, hey, there's a bounty for these Cochise cowboys who tried to rob these people. If you give me their information, I'll give you like this $30,000 bounty, and I'll use that to get me to be marshal. And so in the end, those cowboys got killed, so there was no reward for Ike, but Ike was worried that Wyatt was going to sell out his secret, and then the cowboys would kill him. So that escalates Ike's character to get into like a gunfight that leads this thing here. It's because of shady dealings from Wyatt trying to get some insider scoop to become marshal.
Yeah, because Ike is just played as kind of, well, up to this point in time, he's just kind of the guy in the background who barks things, and then has a brief character reveal as someone who doesn't like Virgil before what happens next. So it's like that's actually way more interesting.
Yeah, like that's the real story, and that was like a year of time going on, and like the constant fear that Wyatt was going to sell him out was what escalates Ike historically.
Quick note: I do have to shout out that during this establishing leading up to this, there's a wagon that goes by which says equal pay for equal work regardless of sex. And my first thought was, well, I'm glad we sorted that out since the 1800s.
Jesus.
But again, little details like that of like going, yes, that was suffragette, movement time. So like those kinds of things were relevant. And the movie does a really good job of showing something that was said at the beginning, which is that this place was seen as up and coming. Paris fashions were sold off the back of wagons, according to the narration. And so they're doing a really good job of showing what I now recognize as an archetypal Western genre town, but with enough touches of cosmopolitan flair to make you genuinely believe that this is a town that is struggling between its lawless boomtown nature and becoming an actual proper, quote unquote, civilized town.
Because I think originally the person who went to found Tombstone was told they shouldn't because it's too violent of an area, and it was the fact that they found the mines that gave them the money to be able to make the town.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. We're so at like the crux of the movie. The movie stops after this, don't they all? Because everyone wants to get the OK Corral, then it's the end of the movie.
I do want to talk a little bit about Ike confronting Virgil, because it's another one of the part of scenes I really like is because Ike likes to use the word pimp around the Earps a lot, especially in this chunk, right? I'm going to cut your pimp's heart out. You're nothing but pimps. And watching it this time around, I was like, Ike's not entirely wrong, because Ike's complaint is that since Virgil became marshal, the cowboys are being hit up by gun laws, but all of Virgil's friends aren't.
Virgil or Wyatt?
Well, it's Wyatt's friends, but he's using Virgil as the target of his ire. Ike is accusing Virgil of it, but it is actually Wyatt, right? But like, because Virgil's the one with the star, Ike's directing his ire at Virgil. And so let's just say the Earps, to be clear. So like the Earps get to clamp down on the cowboys with these laws, but seem to let their friends, like specifically Doc Holliday, go off without a hitch. And he's not wrong. And that's something that I always noticed when I first watched the movie, but the more I watch it, the more I enjoy about the movie, is because nobody in this movie is entirely right or entirely wrong. Even the cowboys. The cowboys have, to coin a phrase, some valid points.
Eric Thanos did too.
Right. Yes. Or the master of magnetism. But no, there are no Magneto. But so it's like Ike is clearly in the wrong for a lot of this, right? But on some level, I do empathize with someone in law enforcement abusing their authority to protect their friends, and then when they get hurt, not being sympathetic to them not dying. It's like, "Well, I hope you die." It's like, I that gets quoted a lot, amongst my friends, and it's like, that's coming from Ike Clinton, but, like, in that moment, there's a bit of audience up there like going, "I kinda almost see your point even though you're a piece of shit." And then, of course, he slaps the bartender, so immediately all sympathy leaves. In case you were briefly worried about it, Ike corrects course, and the movie again does a really good job of like, we'll show you a glimpse into some complexity, but then we'll reorient you morally and where this movie needs to go. But yes, okay, the fight at the OK Corral happens.
Before we go on, something I want to mention specifically, you talked about suffrage and the historical accuracy of that. I'm going to say most of that is because of the director, Cosmanetti, or whoever he was technical and wanted historical accuracy. So I'm going to give all those points to him, regardless of whether or not how much work Kurt Russell did, because it was a pair of them. And this movie is killing it. And I don't think he could have done it without both of them. It's not a spoiler for my own thoughts on it, but that director is not getting, I think, a lot of credit now that they came out about what Kurt Russell did. So
I think it's fair. I think it's really fair, honestly.
And I bring him up here because he said he'd shot so much footage of them walking down the street that the studio said, nope. Because there's so much footage here that makes it feel like the end of the movie. So you can't do that. So he said, I cut some of it and put it later in the film at the end as sort of like a little montage thing to show thought and consideration for what a director does.
That's a fair point because, like, when I first watched the movie, I genuinely was like, "Oh, this movie's already over already?" And realized, no, we're only halfway through. Like, this is the halfway point of the movie, but it does have finale feel to a fair chunk of it. It is the big fight, but notably, outside of a couple of instances of violence, like the murdering of the marshal and whatnot, it's the only actual quote unquote gunfight we have so far in the movie. People have been gunned down, people have been shot briefly, but like this is something the closest thing we have to a proper gunfight at this point in the movie. So it feels like a climax, but in retrospect, what I'm now seeing is that this is an illustration of the simmering violence that's been building up over all the tension, all the conflicts that have been building up over the course of the movie. This is the final, the dam has burst, and things happen. And because they're, as you said before, trying to go through the beats of history, even though how they got there and how those beats worked are not accurate, we're left some interesting moments like Doc straight up missing, but Morgan doesn't, right? And what we're left with is a really interesting place that the movie then builds on in a minute, which is that gunfights are messy.
Yeah.
And so the movie's going to play with that in interesting ways going forward. But here we see up till now, gunfights have been much like you expect in a Western. I point it at the guy and the guy dies, or I miss at dramatically appropriate moments, right? Here we're starting to see that you're going to miss more than you hit. And even at close range, missing is going to happen a fairly, more than you like it to. So that's starting to show that there's been so much talk about the legends of these characters up to this point in time, and now we're seeing that the reality is not measuring up in some very substantive ways.
Because this is a point where you talk about how the guns were not always accurate. They had shorter ranges than what people think they do. Also, maintenance is super important. And you can assume they're not keeping their guns maintained how they should because they're fucking sand and everything else around them. So all of these are factors coupled with the fact that people get super nervous and they shoot quick, which is also why there's this thing about like Wyatt Earp always just standing out in the open and shooting and not being hit. People add it to his mystique of his awesome character. It's because people are scared as fuck and they're shooting at random and he's getting lucky.
Right. And it goes back to, again, the earlier point about Curly Bill accidentally, quote unquote, murdering the mayor or the marshal. It's that, because we had that reaction scene of him being kind of shocked and a little disgusted that he actually resulted for this, that puts that seed in our head so we could play it out here at some level, which is that, it's chaos. It's not even controlled chaos. It's just chaos. It's just violence and chaos. And that's something that was refreshing to me from the perspective of not really liking Westerns. Like, oh, this is a new way of approaching Westerns for me. Again, I'm now seeing that there's seeds of that going all the way back to the 70s for that. But here it's fairly stark in showing that, you expecting the OK show at the OK Corral, but here's the actual show at the OK Corral, quote unquote. And it's not nearly as glorious or amazing as you were maybe told it was.
Yeah. But the shotgun bit is historical because I think that from where there was talk of the shotgun being passed around and everything else back and forth. Because
Right. Like,
shotgun is a fucking game changer. Like it's
and I believe it's actually accurate that someone, I don't know if it's Holiday for certain, but someone did shoot the gun to cause the horse to rear up and then shoot under the horse. I believe that was a historical beat too.
That I don't remember, but yeah.
Which I remember, which is one of my favorite bits of the gunfight, honestly, is that using the guns in creative ways was a neat little bit. And then Ike crashing out of the fight and then crashing back into the fight. Again, it's just chaos, which is again something I hadn't seen before, and I was really excited about it.
And I think Doc doesn't get shot historically. And like the only one of them doesn't get shot,
Okay.
I think, is Wyatt.
Okay. Yeah, because a lot of them do get shot in this.
And we talk about some historical stuff, but come on, like when they pump Lowell full of bullets, I love it, but come on.
Right? No, there are moments where, right, there are moments where the violence does start to eke a little into plot necessity, right? So like it's not universally good, but like in this moment when the movie's forcing itself to stick something close, somewhat resembling history, it's interesting to see that where the movie kind of lands as a result of like, there's a reason why we've been avoiding this violence because it's messy and awful. Not because we're scared of shooting somebody, but like talking someone down is a sure chance of success than necessarily getting into a gunfight with someone.
And then I do love at the end of the fight, Behan rolls up, you're all under arrest.
Right. I don't think I'll be arrested today.
and mind you, they didn't get arrested for a couple days, but I really doubt it went down like that though.
Right. But yeah, like, and it's interesting because like again, in quick succession, Wyatt just tells the law enforcement, "Nah, I'm good. I'm not going to be arrested. Thank you." And then while his brothers are bleeding, stares at a pretty woman for like 5 minutes. Yeah. I'm like, you're a piece of shit, Wyatt.
I'm glad you're missing Josephine. They could have easily have cut that character. We did not need a Louvre story in the movie. We still had his common law wife if we wanted to establish, like, because they may have been concerned about people thinking that Wyatt and Doc were having some relations on the side. Maybe that was a concern.
Maybe. I don't know.
I'm trying to think of a reason why Dana Delaney is here in a role that does nothing. Literally does nothing.
She is frankly wasted.
Yeah.
And this is probably one of the most egregious examples of tacked on romantic subplot we've seen in a while.
I will say Silverado was that more so than this. Do you remember the love interest in Silverado?
No, and that's the problem, right? But this one is, I feel this is okay. This is not more tacked on because obviously the Silverado one's very clearly tacked on because I don't remember it. But I should say this one's more superfluous because I do remember it. You can't take it out of the movie easily, but it does absolutely nothing.
And
which is about Wyatt's love for Doc.
It should be. It is almost a buddy cop movie. Almost.
It really is. In the middle of all this, also, there's a brief, well, not too brief, but there's a scene where a doctor sees Doc to explain to him about his tuberculosis, and Doc's like, the doctor, I should say, is like, stop smoking, stop drinking, stop gambling. And Doc clearly is like going, yeah, get out. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. And then he tries to tell his girlfriend that he needs to change his ways, and she gives him a cigarette. And it's a great, it's small beat, but it's like, it's clear that Doc has a death wish. And that is an important beat for the movie. But also watching it this time, I realized how uh not corporate, how transactional Doc and Kate's relationship is, right? It's like he doesn't think anyone loves him, and she's using him for the money, and he's kind of aware of that and okay with it.
Kate was also a sex worker, in case you were curious.
Sure, right, but it's definitely much more explicitly manipulative in a way we haven't seen in other movies.
Yeah. So their relationship was tumultuous, I think, at best. But part of it is like Doc was a dentist who had to stop being a dentist because his tuberculosis got so bad he'd have coughing fits, and you don't want a dentist with coughing fits.
Right, exactly.
And I think he found out he had tuberculosis when he was a teenager. So yeah, once again, reinforcing these are young characters. So you get like this Val Kilmer who's late 30s maybe at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
he would have been like early mid-20s, yeah. Okay. Anything else about the gunfight at the OK Corral?
Well, technically we get into the legal aspects of it, where Behan says that they were they have their guns, but then later I think in the trial he said something that was a little bit different. There was a riff on it. So no, not really. I could get into nuance.
By the way, Behan's a bad guy, in case it wasn't clear at this point in time. Yeah.
Behan's an asshole like everybody else in this movie.
Right. That's a bit fair enough. Okay, so in retaliation for the cowboy death...
I do want to take a beat specifically to point out that Josephine is in a relationship with Behan. Okay, please go ahead.
Okay.
I don't know if you knew that, but...
No, I didn't. It wasn't clear. Retaliation, Wyatt's brothers are ambushed. Morgan is killed while Virgil's left disabled. Some cowboys quit the gang in disgust and side with the Earps. A despondent Wyatt and his family leave Tombstone and board a train with Ike Clanton and Frank Stillwell close behind, preparing to ambush them again. Having been appointed U.S. Marshal, Wyatt sees his family leave safely, then surprises the assassins. He kills Stillwell, but lets Clanton live to carry the message that Wyatt has vowed to put an end to the cowboys. Wyatt, Doc, a reformed cowboy named Sherman McMasters, Texas Jack Vermillion, and Turkey Creek Jack Johnson form a posse to seek revenge. Turkey Creek Jack Johnson. Say that 5 times fast.
Oh, God.
So, again, this is the part of the movie that is kind of the most referenced, the most memed, the most quoted. I mean, there are other parts that are referenced, but like the highest density of it is in this chunk of the movie.
Yeah.
And it is so melodramatic. Like there's literally a thunderstorm playing over most of this scene. And it's just like, by the way, this is where the bad stuff happened. Again, it's like this is the well by thing. It's so dramatic and in a way that's almost a bit funny watching it again several times.
Yeah, it's where we get our vengeance arc that kicks into play.
Yep.
We get to see the rain machine that's not working quite right, because if you see the scene where Wyatt wanders out into the rain, part of the street is super wet, the other part is super dry. Where we can see like the budget hit our snag.
Right.
But
Johnny
and this is where Josephine is super important
at this point.
Josephine is super important right here. She comes in to warn everyone mere seconds before someone comes in and randomly shoots in the house. Look at that.
Right. Yes. We're seeing the limits, because like there's a bit of Josephine and Maddie are like doing something in the background. And you can see the vestiges of larger plots, but there's the again the heavy drama of like Morgan's killed, but he's on the billiard table that he said he wanted to have in his house because look at him dying on the thing that he wanted to show as a symbol for a better life. It's like, I get it, Tombstone. I get it. I got it. It's bad. Thank you. No, I got it, Tombstone. Thank you.
They can't cut that Bill Paxton scene. That's Bill Paxton's most important scene in this whole movie, Eddie.
It is. It's the only part where I care about this character, and even then, I don't really care. Like, so Bill Paxton's big line is like, remember when I said there's light when you die? That ain't true. I don't see nothing, right? Every time I hit that scene, I have forgotten that he talked about seeing a light when you die like 20 minutes earlier. He does. Every time I go back and check, and every time it's there. But I have forgotten because, like you said, Bill Paxton just there's so much good stuff happening here that Bill Paxton is doing a great job, but it just gets lost in the sheer intensity of everybody on this screen.
And it's no fault against him. It's just that,
No,
ugh.
right?
Yeah, and they ride for blood. They recruit Merle from The Walking Dead to be part of their posse to go after him.
Yeah, yeah, I saw that. That's awesome. Also, by this point in the movie, everybody involved who has a gun is ultimately, in some way, shape, or form, legal law enforcement. So both sides have been deputized by some law enforcement. So this is just police on police violence.
Well, oh my god, I'm never going to say that. This is a point, though, I think, where we get the. You know what? It is not this yet. I'm going to save that for the next part. But this is where we get Jason Priestley's character turn.
Right.
And we get, if I'm no, that's Jason Priestley's here. The other beat is the next scene. And that is a nice touch to go back to that. I would have liked to have seen more of that character arc, because this is also we get Dana Delaney saying, I think she even specifically says that her relationship with what's his nose wasn't like that, which then could infer that maybe Jason Priestley and he were having some fun. Who knows? It's all on the cutting room floor somewhere. All right, probably in the script department.
Right, yeah. And like, you can see the movie trying to streamline itself at this point in time. Like, literally large chunks of Wyatt's cast are put on a train and driven the hell out of this movie. You know? It's like, okay, we need to get down to just Doc and Wyatt. So everyone else get on the train or die. I don't care which, just pick one.
Yeah. And extras.
And right, like specifically Virgil. I get a little frustrated about Virgil because I feel like he's way cooler of a character than the movie letting him be. And one of the things that always resonate with me, to as a disabled person, and it resonates more each time I watch it, is when when the doctor says like he'll never get use of his arm again, right? And his wife's getting despondent about that, and Virgil's like, "I only need one arm to hold you," right? Such a badass line.
Yeah.
But also really resonates to like a Virgil basically saying, I can still do my job. I can still do this. Just because I want one arm doesn't stop me. Right. And so putting him on the train and having him drive the plot, it's like, I understand why it needs to happen, but it does slightly undercut Virgil's turn there. You know, it's like I could do this. I don't need two arms. And then the plot goes, yeah, cool, but buddy, we need you to Sam Elliott, you know, your wage packet's expiring, so we need you to, you know.
And I think later in life too, Virgil becomes a sheriff or marshal again.
Right, with his one arm. Yeah, they do say that they say in the closing narration that even though he had one arm, he still became a law enforcement officer.
Yeah.
Which
but
again,
it can't be
cool
that story. Because this is a love story between Doc and Wyatt.
Yes, I was to say, I thought you were bringing up the other thing. No, yes, his love story between Doc and Wyatt, completely.
Why would I bring up Josephine? It's not a real love story with Josephine.
No, it's not.
All right, I'll talk about it here. They can't have Maddie Blaylock's character be here, and then they have her addicted to laudanum and everything else, and she pines for Wyatt, who wants now a life with Josephine, because that is too much complexity of relationship. They're not going to put enough effort into to have us as an audience care one way or the other, because that leaves us conflicted as an audience.
Right, I agree with that, but something you've said a lot of times is that sometimes the movies will raise questions that it doesn't want me asking, and if I don't have anything else to think about, I end up asking those questions. And most time I watch this movie, I don't think about it because the movie's really good at distracting me from that stuff. But because I'm analyzing this movie, it's forcing me to ask questions about Maddie that the movie should not be causing me to even ask.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's all I have for this piece. The next piece I have some stuff for.
Now we're getting to the other half. After murdering many cowboys in a montage, Wyatt and his posse are ambushed in a riverside forest by the cowboys. Wyatt walks into the creek, miraculously surviving the enemy fire, and kills Curly Bill along with many of his men. Curly Bill's second in command, Johnny Ringo, becomes the new head of the Cowboys. When Doc's health worsens, the group is accommodated by Henry Hooker and his ranch. Ringo lures McMasters into the Cowboys' clutches under the pretense of parley, and then as a messenger, dragging McMasters' corpse to tell Wyatt that he wants a showdown to end the hostilities, and Wyatt agrees. So we have the next chunk of the movie, which, I mean, it centers around the river scene, which, again, another one that's commonly well referenced.
You know, it's a love story because in the montage, Doc and Wyatt on horseback riding shake motherfucking hands and smile at the camera, Eddie. They're on horses and they shake hands. Like, that scene looks awkward as fuck, but it does. Glorious. Glorious.
Yes.
And historically, I think they killed maybe like half a dozen people. Not this many.
Yeah, the movie very much pitching it is like, we murdered all of them. And it's like, how many cowboys do you have, right? There's just the numbers are at weird questions, but you know, it's a big organization. That's fine.
Well, because the other big thing is the legends are always larger because Doc didn't kill that many people, if I remember right, and stuff like that. Right. So it's the legend. Exactly.
And the movie, to be fair, is all about talking about how the legend is a matchup to the reality. And this is another kind of chunk of that, right? Because like you said, Wyatt wanders into the river and doesn't get shot. And Doc simultaneously promotes and undercuts the legend in a clever way. Where he's like, one of the Bobby's like, oh, I've never seen nothing like that. And Wyatt's like, yeah, or Doc says, Wyatt's over there walking on water. And the way he says it, it's sarcastic, but it's also promoting the legends, right? So it's again pitch perfect. Val Kilmer plays that perfectly because he's taking the mick out of his friend, but also celebrating that this crazy thing happened. And again, because the movie earlier talked, because of the actual shit that Corral showed how chaotic these fights can be, this lands, unlike, say, I don't know, Pale Rider, where it's like, it's up in the air, what it could possibly be, but it's obviously supernatural. This one, it genuinely could be just a fluke of chaotic gunfights or something weird happened around Wyatt, right?
Yeah. And part of it goes, I think, can't remember if it was a specific person or not, but someone always talks about it's not the fastest draw, it's the most accurate that matters.
Right.
And this movie leans into that because I think other people are shooting more often than what we see Wyatt shoot, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Now, I will say, painting Wyatt Earp as a messianic figure is a little fraught, just knowing what I know about Wyatt Earp now, right? So it's like, not in love with that, but again, like, I feel like the way the scene is pitched, and again, by Doc kind of undercutting it while also promoting it, I think it ultimately works.
I think painting anyone generally as a messianic figure is messy.
Agreed.
But I'm talking about you, Maudib.
I am Tiny Rat. Please worship me. And then Charlton Heston. I keep forgetting he's in this movie too.
I can never not see that man, and my brain instantly goes, damn Dirty Apes. Whenever I see him in his voice all the time, regardless of anything I've ever seen him in other than that.
Right. He will always be the guy from Planet of the Apes. Yes. 1000%.
Even when he's in Soylent Green, I still think the same thing.
Nice. And then McMaster's the guy who decided to throw down his sash and I'm not going to be a member of the Cowboys anymore, so I'll help you. And then he dies. And it's like, that was a fast character arc. And it's like, it's just enough to give like a mild shit about him. It's like, oh, I remember your name now. So I care enough about your character that I remembered who your name is. So when you die, it's like, oh, the person whose name I know is now dead. But again, it feels like this is the part where maybe some movie got cut.
Yeah, but see, like I'm glad the movie went past OK Corral, but this part feels like they were frantically trying to piece together some of the stuff that happened afterwards. Like they'd cut so many subplots, they had to make other corrections, and
Right.
they were hoping that Val Kilmer and Kurt Russell's chemistry would outshine anything else that they were doing. And pretty much, they're not mistaken.
They're right. So one thing that's always been a bit odd to me, not bad, is it's Curly Bill's death. First of all, I genuinely love every time I see it. They're getting into a massive gunfight. Wyatt and a Doc have got this posse to track him down specifically and murder his gang. And the first thing it says, "Well, howdy, boys. How are you doing? How the hell are you?" And just like, God damn it, Powers Booth, you are amazing. Oh, it's so good, right? But then he dies, right? He just straight up dies, and then Ringo gets control of the gang, and like, this is where I sometimes quibble with people. People seem to put this movie either it is a movie about Wyatt Earp or it's a movie about Doc Holliday. And I feel like the answer should and always has been both. And I feel like this proves that, because if this had been a movie about just Wyatt Earp,
he would have taken Ringo out.
Right. Ringo would be the final confrontation, right? It'd be Wyatt versus Ringo was a big confrontation. And as we're about to get to in a second, the confrontation between between Doc and Ringo is not cathartic. So by taking Ringo out near the end of the movie, Wyatt gets kind of what he wants, and Doc gets what he wants in a minute here. But it's not the big dramatic, the whole thing ends in a gunfight per se. In fact, it's actually, this gunfight is less dramatic than the actual OK Corral that happened in the middle of the movie.
I think the exact opposite.
Really? Okay.
I think this fight is more dramatic than the OK Corral. The OK Corral was very actiony, and that was fun to watch. But this has like gravitas between two people circling each other, where one shot matters. Like that had a whole bunch of bullets. It is coming down to almost like the Oni of it all. That whoever's going to draw and hit matters.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm talking about the river gunfight.
Well, no, I don't give a fuck about that.
No. We're not quite to the actual showdown.
Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, it's fair. I was talking ahead and didn't make myself clear, so that's on my fault. But yeah, I'm talking about the confrontation between Wyatt and Ringo. Sorry, no, the Wyatt and Curly Bill.
Curly Bill
is not as dramatic as the actual OK Corral scene, which undercuts the idea this is a Wyatt Earp movie, because his Curly Bill's death is almost perfunctory in retrospect, right? But let's get to the rest of the movie and I'll explain more because I have my thought as to why it's not either of those movies. Unless you have something else to talk about in this chunk.
Just the duel between Kilmer and Michael Biehn, I think. Like that, amazing. And historically, they did find, I think, Ringo dead with a shot to the head. It could have been suicide, maybe not suicide. Okay. But there's no I don't think there's any way that Doc could have done it, but maybe Doc did it.
Right.
But the Earps, I don't think ever took credit for it. So then it becomes more of a thing. And we've seen the Earps, they take credit for anything. So it's
right. Exactly. Yeah, it's true.
That's it.
Cool. Okay. So I'll summarize the rest of the film then, and we can talk about it, because that scene is worth talking about. So Wyatt sets off for the showdown, not knowing that Doc has already arrived at the scene. Doc confronts a surprised Ringo, who is expecting Wyatt, and challenges him to a duel to finish their game, which Ringo accepts. Wyatt comes running when he hears a gunshot, only to encounter Doc, who has killed Ringo. They then press on to complete their task of eliminating the Cowboys, although Clanton escapes their vengeance by renouncing his red sash. Doc is sent to a sanitarium in Colorado where he dies of his illness. At Doc's urging, Wyatt pursues Josephine to begin a new life. The final narration mentions that the cowboy gang was destroyed forever. Clanton was shot and killed in an attempted robbery. Maddie died of a drug overdose shortly after leaving Tombstone. And Virgil and Allie Earp moved to California, where Virgil, despite only having the use of one arm, still has a long career as a lawman. While Wyatt and Josephine would stay together for 47 years until Wyatt's death in LA in 1929. And among the pallbearers at his funeral were William S. Hart and Tom Mix. So, yes. So the conversation between Doc and Ringo, obviously, we've set up very clearly by the movie. It's like they confronted twice before this, so rule of threes. They have to have a final confrontation.
Yep.
But you're right. Like, this is a dramatic showdown, but it's also very cramped, right? It's not a big, open, spacious gunfight. It's a very small space, and like I said, they're circling each other around, and it's just they both pull a gun, they both shoot, it's over. One's live, one's not. So it's dramatic, but it's also it's more about the act of the will between the two men. And again, it's not two men standing in a long street staring at each other. They're circling each other around. It's almost like boxers in a lot of ways.
And
so
it's the fact that when he shoots him, he doesn't die immediately, and he even puts his gun away and taunts him before he dies. Like,
yes, talk shit, right? And one of the things I love about this scene is that Doc's doesn't have a ton of emotion. Okay, he doesn't show a lot of emotion during the conflict, but after Ringo's been shot, Doc's angry, right? And again, no one says this out loud, but the movie has showed us that Doc was hoping to die here. And he's mad that Ringo wasn't good enough. And that's all how Val Kilmer's playing it, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Phenomenally talented.
Because
then I have to think to myself, because I have to think to myself, he's an exceptional Doc Holliday, but then I have to remember that he's also Nick Rivers, who had an underwater fight.
Oh, yeah.
I made a Top Secret joke.
You did. I haven't watched Top Secret. I should watch it again. It's been a while.
It's all about punching Nazis.
Especially after doing a James Bond run, I wonder if Top Secret would be funnier because that's the movies just making fun of, right? But yeah, so at this point in time, the movie had both been like, okay, we also have to wrap a few things up. For some reason, I felt the need to close the loop on the Ike Clanton storyline, and it's like, okay,
because he's out there,
right? It's like he's a named character who's had a few lines, so I guess we should make it clear that he gave up. And again, they do a pretty good visual storytelling of like him throwing the sash behind him as he's running the horse, and then Wyatt puts the gun away and drives. I was like, okay, so like for showing rather than telling, I do like at least that part of it. But it does smack of, oh yeah, we have to close this loop.
And the sanatorium scene was super nice because it touches on it, and it has like Doc who looks down at his feet, noticing socks, and you get that comment because he's wanted to die this whole time, so he figured he would die with his boots on. Oh, it's like,
yeah, and that's another thing. Is like when he stares at his feet and goes, "Huh, ain't that something?" and then dies. I admit, the first time I watched it, I was like, I don't get it. I watched the second time, I was like, oh, he was supposed to die with his boots on, but he didn't. He died in a bed, right? And again, it's no point did he make a comment about wanting to die with his boots on. It's just something you have to know, right? So if you don't get it, that's okay. You still get the fact that Doc, even in his final breath, was still finding novelty in the world, because that's what he's all about. But if you get the, do you have his boots on? Okay. It makes you feel clever as the audience, which is I like it when movies do that.
Yeah. And I know that was a director like Cosmoto, whoever it was. I don't know his name because you mentioned it.
Cosmatos.
Cosmatos' choice, because he even talks about it in like some of the interviews that he was in.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool. Okay.
So like, I would love to know the amount of impact he had, because I'm very much getting a David Lynch Frost sort of thing going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And that scene, honestly, again, one of my favorite scenes. There's a lot of great lines, like just the way Doc says, "Why I don't want to play anymore," right? When Wyatt's trying to get him to play cards, because as men, we don't talk about our feelings, and so Wyatt is trying to force the game because that's the only way that he feels like he can talk to Doc, because he can't talk about his feelings, and Doc does not care about your toxic masculinity and wants to have an honest moment with his friends, which Wyatt keeps pushing off. It's a great dynamic, right? Because Doc's like, listen, I want to tell you I love you, goddammit, and never quite get there because Wyatt isn't comfortable with that. And Wyatt wants to be there. He wants to be their first friend, but just can't do it. So it's like, I love it, but it does also continue to leave me with the thing that Wyatt's kind of a piece of shit.
Oh god. Yeah, and that's Tombstone, right? I don't think there's anything else that happens important in this movie.
I mean, Maddie literally dies off screen. Jesus fucking Christ.
Come on, it's whatever. That's what the movie told me.
Right. So I think the final scene also, I mean, also, yes, he finds Josephine and they have love, whatever. I don't give a shit about that. As far as I'm concerned, the movie ends with that conversation in Sanitarium.
Yeah.
And that helps to kind of summarize my thoughts on the movie, which is that that scene shows that the actual movie is about Wyatt and Doc's friendship, right? So I think Kurt Russell was right that the script needed to pare it down to focus on that. The problem is the movie isn't pared down to focus on that. There's actually a large chunks of it that have nothing to do with that. And so I'm left with an odd feeling. Like, I do love the movie. I mean, I can't think of, objectively, there's not much I would change, right? Because the movie clearly is fantastic and I enjoyed it. But if the mission statement is the movie about Doc and Wyatt's friendship, it doesn't quite succeed on that front, at least to start. It gets there. And I argue the turning point is after the corral gunfight. The movie starts to get a better sense of what it wants to do,
Yeah.
but it does introduce a whole bunch of stuff, and then literally has it drive off screen halfway through the movie because it's now in the way.
Is that your final thought of the movie?
Yes, there's too many gas people on a train. I'm still mad about that scene, I guess.
Wow. I I can see why people love this film. It is an
Yeah,
utterly enjoyable film, even with some of the hiccups that it has from like start to finish. It is a solid film. It had a good budget and a phenomenal cast for the budget that it had. I could, and I make fun of the love story in the film for the Josephine and Wyatt because it's not really a love story.
yeah,
It is historically that they needed her to be there because that's who Wyatt ends up with.
right,
Then the film doesn't talk about how they get married. They stay married for like 47 years, but she has a whole slew of lovers and she does a whole bunch of other stuff. And Wyatt has like gambling and all this other stuff. And I think she's a gambler too. Doesn't talk about any of that in the wrap up. So my
right.
biggest crux of this movie is it glosses over history and tries to make everything positive, primarily a positive spin for Wyatt. And it is a hero's tale for Wyatt.
I can see your point, and certainly I agree with it, honestly. But I also feel like if the movie wasn't trying to weirdly cleave to specific beats of history, I think it would have been too pat and too neat if it had been purely fictional. If they take the names Wyatt and Doc Holliday out of this and make completely fictional characters but tell the same story, I think it would have been too neat. But because it was historical on some level, the messiness creeps into the script and gives it a certain flavor and vibe that it wouldn't have otherwise. So, like, I can't see a version of this that is historically accurate because we're only maybe now at a point where we could look at Wyatt Earp as an honest person and say, okay, no, he's just a piece of shit. but I also don't think a purely fictional version of the story would have entirely worked either. So, like, it is this kind of weird melange of historical fiction, and I think ultimately every person's gonna have their different opinion on where you draw those lines on some level, you know?
Hands down, it is totally recommendable. It is worth watching just for the sheer number of quotes that you can pull from the movie. And it is a great piece of film history.
Yeah, yeah, certainly it is. It is, like I said, on a personal level, it is one that made me. Oh, actually, I think I do like westerns, and it was helpful for me to come back to it after so long and kind of go, okay, I misunderstood what it was doing with westerns. I misunderstood what I thought about westerns, but ultimately, I'm still comfortable with the fact that this does help shift the perspective of westerns from being something that nearly died out in the 80s. As of I know, it's not entirely true, but still, it was a kind of a gulf. And now it's like it's part of a wave of westerns coming back and becoming a more significant genre. But with that said, so we could skip the 90s, right? We're done. Where we can move on to the 2000s.
I would almost agree with you, but anyone that knows me knows that there's no way we can't talk about a seminal Sam Raimi classic that stars a female lead as a gunslinger and a
True.
baby DiCaprio, The Quick and the Dead.
And Gene Hackman.
Yeah, that guy, whoever. But it has so we got to cover The Quick and the Dead. I'm going to save a lot of my other thoughts for it, but Sam Raimi.
I don't think I've seen it, but it's a Sam Raimi film, so I'm probably going to have a certain percentage of opinions about it.
I would feign being shocked that you haven't seen it, but come on, at this point, I can only lie to people for so long after like 16 movies.
We have seen the one Western I recall. Sorry, both the Westerns I have seen before. We have now seen them, so.
I'm curious. All right, we're gonna save most of that for the end, but I am gonna ask you when we do our recap how this has changed your opinion of Westerns and how it has influenced completely your opinion of Tombstone and Blazing Saddles once we get to the end of the run.
Fair. Okay. Yeah. Remind me about that. I'll definitely talk about that.
And everyone knows I'll, of course, remember any questions I come up with now that I don't ask for like a year from now.
That never happened. Nope. Absolutely. So in the meantime, while we're working our way up to that question, how can people talk to you online?
You can find me in Blue Sky, dark_Hugh. You can come to the Discord that Eddie says he puts Discord links into the post. I don't know because I don't check the post. I listen to the episodes, but I don't go into all the nuances of it. Otherwise, you can support me. You can go to my website and buy something. I think I still sell stuff on the Darker website. Who knows?
I think I still sell stuff.
I work at Our Dream now, and I'm still Darker Hugh's president. So it's a lot of RPG work. What about you?
Fair enough. I also occasionally sell stuff. Mostly it is through my website about my dog game, realmsofpugmare.com. At some point, I'm probably going to merge that and my Pug Study website. Still figure out how to do that because ultimately paying 2 website costs is going to be a bit much.
That is ridiculous, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I should stop doing that.
If you just want to throw money away, Eddie, you could like invest that money in getting me a better bottle of scotch that you send me from the UK to the US and pay all those extra taxes on it.
I don't know, man. With the tariffs, it probably would cost me just to get it over there. I could buy like a bottle of like wild turkey and send it over there. It still costs that much. Anyway, come talk to us on the Discord. I would actually love to talk about Westerns on the Discord too, because like I have certainly started to develop an opinion about things now that's different from where it was when I started. So I have grown in my thoughts on this. So we can talk about that, or we'll talk about it when we get around. Then Chris will totally remember the questions he's going to ask me.
Always.
In the meantime, I'll see you then.